There are three types of fees that everybody should be aware of. People tell us they don't often get a straight answer when they're trying to figure out what they're paying in advisor fees or the cost of their investments. I don't mind people getting paid. I just want to know how they're getting paid. You might think that's weird coming from a financial planner who collects a fee, but at our firm, we operate by the golden rule and we, treat people the way we want to be treated. And one of the big things to that is being transparent. And my goal is for you to come away from this video armed with an understanding that you can use in your own situation. First, we're going to break down the types of fees, where you can find those fees for yourself, what I do personally in my own retirement plan. And then lastly, we're going to cover the types of advisors that may offer these lesser expensive or more expensive investments. I'm Nick Davies, founder of Brindle and Bay Wealth Management. We are a retirement and tax planning firm in Texas. We work with people from all over to help them create peace with their financial plan. If this message today resonates with you, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified when the next message comes out. Thanks for that. Okay, the first thing is we're going to talk about the types of fees. So the purest form, in my opinion, is the advisor fee plus cost of investment. This is where you have a clearly defined advisor fee cost, and this could range anywhere from as low as 0.25, which would be 0.25% per year, all the way up to a crazy 2% per year. Let's just give the industry average of, say, 1%. So the purest form, in my opinion, would be that advisor fee of 1% plus the cost of the investment. So we have to add both of those together to know what the total cost is. Your investment cost could be zero, because maybe it's an individual stock, or you could have lower cost mutual funds. You could have higher cost mutual funds. You could have variable annuities. You could have exchange traded funds. So there's many things it could be. So we're going to have to break down how those work as well today. Or it could be a combination of fees. You have advisor plus mutual funds. You have advisor plus stocks and mutual funds. You have advisor plus third-party manager plus ETFs plus mutual funds plus stocks. You have advisor fee plus third-party manager plus ETFs and maybe mutual funds and other things. Or you just have advisor plus ETFs and stocks. Now, disclaimer, I'm not giving you advice for you today, and I'm not saying any of these are better or worse. I'm going to give you my opinion in terms of what I like, what I believe, but this is not advice for you. We're just laying it out. Other combinations include no advisor fee plus mutual funds, because maybe they're getting paid from the mutual funds. No advisor fee plus stocks and ETFs, because maybe you're doing it yourself. Or no advisor fee plus your 401k, because the fee is baked into the NAV, which we'll talk about in a minute. So as you can see, any combination is possible. I showed you these so you could realize we need to add these things up for us to know exactly what we're paying and what our costs are. Now we need to break down how fees show up inside of our investments. So we're going to break down mutual funds, ETFs, and 401ks. First, let's start with mutual funds. There are three ways to pay for mutual funds. The first one is a front-end load. This is where a commission is paid to an advisor when you put the money in. So if you put $100,000 in, for example, and the commission is 5%, then $95,000 actually gets invested. The next way is back-end load funds. So this is where you pay a fee if you try to sell that fund early, and it starts usually at a higher percentage and then goes down each year. And on top of that, there's usually an internal cost called an expense ratio or a net asset value, which we'll talk about in a minute. And the next way is a level load, often known as a C share. 12B-1 fees are internal marketing costs, and these can range anywhere from 0.25% per year, which is pretty common, all the way up to as high as 1%. And these are ongoing, so they never go away. So for example, if this internal cost were 0.50, this would be ongoing. And if we were looking at $100,000, that would be $500 per year that would be charged inside of the account. And the key here is that it would never be spelled out in dollars. So you would never see $500. You would only be able to go look up and see if there's a 12B1 fee. I should also mention that there are no load funds, and these do not cost that customer or client anything up front. However, the advisor or the brokerage account is oftentimes compensated in various other ways through selling agreements, or the brokerage firm may be credited directly from the fund itself. Even though the customer does not pay a fee directly, people would criticize, including myself, that it still affects the bottom line, especially when there's other ways to invest like ETFs or individual holdings. So in these no-load funds, the customer is not really aware of who's getting paid and how it really is affecting their bottom line. Now, as an aside, I am not advocating using any of these funds. Personally, I don't like these ideas. I use and believe more in exchange-traded funds and individual holdings, which I'll get to later, but I want to lay it all out for you. I'm merely giving you a practical guide. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you where you can go online and you can look for yourself to find these costs. But before we do that, we need to talk about 401ks and exchange-traded funds. So first, let's talk about exchange-traded funds, or ETFs. I'll refer to them as ETFs from here forward. ETFs are similar to mutual funds in that they are a basket of stocks. However, they're known to be more transparent and tax efficient. The cost of an ETF is known as an expense ratio. And that expense ratio could be anything from as low as like 0.06, or it could be 0.40%, or it could be 0.80%, or it could be 1% or more. So in a minute, I'm going to show you exactly where to find these expense ratios online for yourself. But for example, if it was a 0.06 expense ratio for a $100,000 investment, that's $60 per year. And most importantly, these are never reported in dollars online. So you'll never see $60 anywhere. You'll only see an expense ratio. But they do affect your bottom line. Lastly, let's talk about 401ks. It's popular for people to think that their 401ks are fee efficient because they don't see any fees or cost. But here is where 401ks cost people the most money, and that is funds. These can also be funds of funds. This is where you're a participant in a 401k plan, but you're given access to funds of funds as the majority or your only choices. And these funds of funds, they don't allow you to directly invest in any holding. This is where the plan participant is given access to these funds, even name brand funds. And these funds invest in other funds, multiple mutual funds and individual holdings, but they're never really aware of what they're explicitly invested in. So it may be called a growth fund. You see, funds have what's called the net asset value, or NAV, and this is where the waters can get muddy. Funds of funds invest in other mutual funds, and each set of funds has its own set of fees. These are not always clear in the expense ratio. These fees are typically incorporated into the NAV, and it makes it difficult to distinguish the individual components. 401ks also have custodial fees, 12B1 fees, administrative fees, and a list of 4 or 5 other potential fees. That being said, you might be surprised to know that I personally use a workplace 401k. And the reason for that is, like in all things, it's a tool, and it allows me to get more dollars into different tax statuses like tax deferred or the Roth 401k. And all of this is just because of different IRS rules. Okay, so we talked about how mutual funds have fees, ETFs have fees, and 401ks have fees. And now let's talk about where you can look to find them. And I'm just going to go to Yahoo Finance. So we're going to go to Yahoo Finance, finance.yahoo.com, and you can look at your statement and you could find any of your holdings. And I'm just going to put a popular one in here. This is I'm not endorsing any fund, nor am I bashing any fund. I'm just going to point out this is a pretty common one. And so you'll notice, you'll see it come up here. And if you'll click on the profile, you'll see an expense ratio here, 0.45. And if you click on profile, scroll down a little bit, here you can see that the expense ratio is 0.45%. Just out of curiosity, you can also see that it's large cap growth is the style. And if you want to see the holdings, it's also interesting to note what is in there. And just taking note here, this is Meta, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon. These are things that are also available in potentially lower cost exchange traded funds, which we'll talk about as well. You could also look at another one. So people often will just look at their statement and start to type in what they have. And so American funds is one people have a lot of. And let's click you go back to profile. So here you can see this has got quite a high expense ratio, 1.39. So we click on profile. We can see by scrolling down a little bit, 1.39%. Similar Morningstar style box, a large cap growth is what this box is showing. Again, something similar to the S&P 500. You can do this with virtually any fund. So you can do it just one by one. You could add them all up. Let me show you what advisors oftentimes can do. So this is not endorsing any one holding. Again, I'm just giving you a generic example. This is for John Doe, and people use Morningstar for this. This is a program similar to Morningstar. And it's comparing their portfolio. And then I'm just going to give you a comparison in terms of costs, so you can see the internal cost of funds versus exchange traded funds. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different funds, mutual funds. And this is John Doe's $545,000. And then over here on the right, just using a very generic, you'll see all these other numbers here are for the same amount of money as a comparison, but we're not endorsing this Vanguard ETF at all for you, but these are just examples. So these are ETFs. So also notice they have less ticker symbols. Typically, mutual funds tend to have more ticker symbols. So there's several ETFs, and then below that, you'll notice individual stocks are sprinkled in. Remember, we talked about stocks not having any expense ratio. There's no real cost to stocks. Now, I'm not endorsing these stocks for you, but I am saying we're comparing all of this person's added up funds compared to a similar type of situation with lower cost ETFs. So the top 10 holdings for both accounts, Microsoft and Broadcom, and very similar holdings, very similar type of allocation, not exact, but similar. And then this is the page I wanted to get to. So with the funds expense ratio, we can see that this person discovered that their basket of mutual funds has an expense ratio of 0.74. And so when we looked, we can see the expense ratio. We can see that if they paid a load, it could be up to 5.75%. So that may or may not have been paid. It depends, and if they're aware of if they paid that or not. But ongoing, if you add all this up on $545,000, there's $4,000 that's never spelled out in dollars, okay? But it is in there in a ratio. So you'd have to look at that expense ratio to see that. Comparing the same $545,000 to ETFs, and Vanguard is known for having lower internal costs. That's why I use them as an example here in this case. You have a total expense ratio of 0.07. So $374 a year on the same $500,000. So we could say that this is 1.74% in total fees, but we would only see the 1% because that's the advisory fee. And we could say that this is 1.07%. And again, we'd only see the 1% because we're only seeing that advisory fee. So we looked at 1.74% as compared to 1.07%, and the difference is 0.67. So on $500,000, the difference of 0.67, which is less than 1%, is 67% of 1%. That's about $33.50 a year in extra costs. Again, similar holdings. Now you could argue that maybe they got a better management style. Depends on what you believe about the ability to manage holdings in a way that's advantageous long term. But that $33.50 every year at a 7% rate of return over 30 years adds up to over $316,000. So we just assume you're paying an advisory fee, and the difference is I have more expensive investments versus less expensive investments. That's it. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to advocate for having an advisor versus not having an advisor in this video. It's more to kind of point out the difference between more expensive investments versus lesser expensive investments. So that's how you find fees inside of your IRAs and your normal investment accounts. But how do you find fees inside of your 401ks? The short answer is it's not easy. They are required to give you a SPD, a summary plan description, and every year give you fee disclosures. And I can say, as a person who set up my own 401k for my own business, it wasn't easy for me to figure out. And just from a very anecdotal perspective, I have never met anyone that can say that they truly understand the costs of their 401k. In fact, I meet the opposite. We almost always find people that think they're not paying anything for their 401k because they're not out of their pocket, or that it's not a high fee thing. But as we talked about earlier, we have the net asset value, we have the funds of funds. Technically, it's possible to have a low cost 401k. I would like to believe that I set up one for us here at Brindle and Bay personally for our own use, but it took a lot of work to get just those funds that I wanted to have in there. So what is the one thing you can do for your 401k is you can request the information. Look at that summary plan description. You can read through prospectuses and pull things out, start to add those things up and try to get a true sense. But ultimately, I don't think if you have a 401k, that's the worst thing in the world. As you know, I use one myself. It's just try to be aware of the true cost of the 401k. Now let's talk about what I prefer as a financial planner to do for other people and what I prefer for my own plan. How do I do my own plan? And you're going to want to stay tuned, because after that, I'm going to talk about which type of advisors tend to use the more expensive versus the less expensive types of investments. Okay, so what I prefer as a financial planner, I would use the litmus test of who would I want my wife to work with if I were no longer here? And so when I ask myself that question, the first thing that comes to mind is I want transparency as much as possible. Number one, I would like fees to be disclosed on a separate invoice and not baked into things. I would like to use low-cost ETFs and individual stocks if possible. And that's what we do here at Brindle and Bay. Typically, we lean towards that. And that means we want to see things like VOO versus seeing something that says growth fund. And I personally wouldn't want her to have very many, if any, third-party managers. So what do I do personally? Well, I have traditional IRAs. I have a Roth IRA. I have non-qualified accounts. I also have a 401k. Not excited about the investments available, but I am excited about the ability to put more dollars into those particular tax statuses. I had an HSA account, and I would max that out until my healthcare plan changed and I no longer have access to an HSA. And then we have some short-term rental properties that my wife loves to manage. And if she didn't like to manage those, we probably wouldn't have those. See, all of these things are just tools to be used mostly for managing tax status. So for example, probably nobody should put 100% of their money in only Roth. Probably nobody should put 100% of their money only in 401k, right? We need to arrive at retirement with different types of money in different tax status so we can have an effective tax management plan for our retirement. You want to be tax diversified. So since this is a practical guide on how fees work, let's talk about different types of advisors and which types of investments they might be likely to recommend. It can be very confusing, especially when it comes to advisors. I'm going to generalize this. I'm going to put it into 3 categories. I'm probably not going to get it exactly perfect technically, so bear with me. And again, it's a practical guide. So the 3 categories are fee-only advisors, fee-based advisors, and then broker advisors, which is basically everybody else. So if you're not a fee-only advisor or a fee-based advisor, then you are a broker advisor, or they are a broker advisor. Fee-only advisors, to my knowledge, are never going to offer mutual funds that pay them commissions, variable annuities, or life insurance that pay them commissions. If they do annuities, it would be a fee-only annuity. To me, they have the most pure form of fees would be the advisor fee plus whatever the investment cost would be. So whatever that advisor fee is plus the expense ratio in general. Now, fee-based advisors, they can do that. They can be your advisory fee plus the cost of investment, but they could also switch over and be making money on mutual funds or selling life insurance or annuities. And you need to be aware of that. It's not necessarily bad. It's just that they could lean one way or another. And I'm going to comment more on that here in a second. The third version would be broker advisors. And they mostly sell funds or solutions to your problems. Mutual funds, annuities, insurance, private investments. They tend to be less holistic in their planning, and you'll often hear we really can't answer that, or we really don't do that. So you need to go talk to your other professional for that. Their main responsibility is to tell you the details about the product that they have and how that solves your problem. So there's a key difference between telling people how this product solves their problem versus whether or not that is the best product or investment for their overall big picture. I've heard it said that brokers can sell you a suit, but fiduciaries are supposed to make sure that suit looks good on you. I want to give you a quick word on certified financial planners. So certified financial planners can fall into the category of being fee only or fee based. However, every certified financial planner has made a pledge to be a fiduciary and to operate in the best interest of their client, which means they should disclose any and all conflicts of interest. Now, I'm a certified financial planner, and our firm falls in between the fee-based and the fee only. We are fee only when it comes to investments, where we don't take commissions on mutual funds. However, we are fee-based because occasionally we sell life insurance and we would get paid a commission on that, or an annuity. The key here is that we would actually disclose exactly how much we get paid if a person were to use that. Now, for your information and everybody, just to be clear, in the year 2023, we literally did that one time. So we don't do it very often. We're just right on the edge of being fee only, but technically we're fee based. So what does this mean for you? It just means ask questions. How am I invested in, and how am I really paying for it? You see, there can be a really ugly side to the fee based world, because I see a lot of fee based people who present themselves as financial planners, but 80% of what they do involves getting paid a commission. And I'd like to think there's a big difference between that and a firm that simply offers life insurance as a convenience to their clients rather than having to refer it out to somebody else. So as a recap, we talked about you should know your advisory fee plus the cost of your investments. We talked about how mutual funds, ETFs, and 401ks have their internal fees. And we also talked about where you can look to find those fees. And lastly, which types of advisors might recommend certain types of investments. So I hope that helps you with this very misunderstood topic. If you thought this was helpful, hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments if you received some sort of new insight today. Hey there, it's Nick again. I wrote something that you might be interested in. If you want to know what my favorite retirement income strategy is for most people or many people, we refer to it as the Money Master Guardrails. If you're contemplating what your income strategy for retirement may look like, I invite you to download a copy of my white paper. Get the insights you need, download a copy today. The link is in the video description.